I am at GSK for a long time, over 20 years, currently in vaccines. My job has actually changed a little bit from omnichannel and multi-channel. I have a title called GSK Director and Long Tail Customer Acquisition. That'll be the next talk, so we'll figure out what long tail means. I want to talk about marketing questions that I've been pondering over the last couple years. And they're things that we kind of take for granted a little bit or say often without really thinking about them. And is there more to what we're talking about than meets the eye? And so I use this elephant tethered to a steak icon because there's something called a baby elephant syndrome. They say, don't ask a question because you can't see the audience if they know. I don't know if anybody's heard of the baby elephant syndrome, what it means, but basically, when an elephant is born in captivity, they're tethered to this stake to protect them and make sure they don't wander off and that they get fed and all that kind of stuff. But as they grow and can break away from the stake, they don't, because they've been ingrained early on in their life that this is what I should do. I should stay to this stake. And I think it's a great metaphor for what can happen to marketers at any stage of your career, not just the beginning, but that you sort of get tethered to ideas that really should be challenged a little bit and at least thought about in a little bit deeper way. So I have three main questions that I want to ask, and there's sub-questions within them. And the first one is about data, and how can data from the past be used for decisions about the future? And it seems like a no kidding kind of question, but we often talk about the use of data. One of the great strategic thinkers that I really admire is a guy named Roger Martin, who was the Dean of Business at the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto, is really a leading marketing and strategy thinker in the world. He writes a column for Medium. He has several books out. I would definitely recommend reading his stuff because it's really good. He has a video out there on YouTube about the difference between strategy and planning, which is 10 minutes, but it's well worth it. Anyway, he says, the quote there, the overwhelming majority of time in business, the future is different from the past. I think that makes sense, right? So you look at an analysis at data, and you're trying to apply that past circumstance to something in the future that is almost certainly going to be different. And so you're making a decision that, in his words, is fundamentally flawed. So how do you deal with that? Because we don't often think about that. So it led me to this other sub-question, which is, what does data-driven decision-making actually mean? When you think about it, we hear that all the time. And you almost feel like the contrarian view of that doesn't make sense. Well, who's not data-driven? But it's how you use the data. It's not just saying, I'm a data-driven decision marketer. That's like saying on LinkedIn, I'm a results-oriented leader, right? Everybody says that. What does it really mean? Okay, so the three areas within analytics I want to talk about to address this question are what I call the Gawande list, which is a list of, I'll talk about it in a second, the fallacy of averages, and how benchmarks really invite average performance. We hear a lot of talk about benchmarks. Full disclosure, I'm not a big fan. I think they have a place, but most of the time I think they're misused. So let's talk about the Gawande list. It's based on a book called The Checklist Manifesto, written by a surgeon, Atul Gawande, who is also a media personality. He's brilliant. He's got other books that are well worth checking out. And anyway, he had this list, this checklist that professionals use, airline pilots, surgeons, lawyers, to checklist to make sure that they're doing their job appropriately. So I thought, how do I apply that to analytics? Whenever you get an analysis, it seems to me the same issues or same questions kept coming up all the time, whether it was successful or not. Was our spend right? Was our messaging right? Who was the customers that worked, that didn't work? So when I look at this and I say, okay, the account type, is it a hospital? Is it a smaller independent account? How big are they? What's our mix of channels, our messaging that we're putting through to this audience? What's our split of mass versus targeted or branded and unbranded? Search activity, webs, so on. Competitor actions. Did the competitors do something? A new competitor launch? Did one, reduce their spend? What about our sales force? If our brand that we're working on this campaign was a high commission or high priority brand for the field, and now it's not going to be in the future, that obviously has a big difference. So you have to look at these variables and say, I'm going to apply them to the results that I get. So I'm data-driven in the sense that I see the analysis, if I just assume everything's going to be the same going forward, I'm making a mistake most of the time. So this is just kind of a starting point list idea. It doesn't mean it has to be this, but for us it works because these are the variables that most likely influence response and reaction. So if it's not one of these, then you can also think, is this like a unicorn kind of thing where it's like, it's a very unusual circumstance? Is this a fluke? Is this a one-time thing where we benefited or were hurt by some event? You know, years ago with the flooding in New Orleans, there was a lot of, I work in vaccines, so our hepatitis B vaccine did very well then because a lot of people needed Hep B vaccinations. You know that, and then you know that next year, probably not going to happen. Hopefully, it's not going to happen. So you have to. That's an easy one to factor in. But there's always more subtle things: changes in the economy, changes in the unemployment rate, insurance coverage, whatever it is. All these variables that you need to consider that are going to be different. Okay, so let me talk about the fallacy of averages. And this is an analysis that our team had done a couple years ago that I sort of sanitized a little bit. But there's 8 segments there. They either got face-to-face rep activity, triggered messaging, or a digital multi-channel, or they didn't. That's the Y's and the N's, the yes and the no's. It was based on claims data from insurance companies. So you look at the average claims, kind of makes sense. The ones that had no promotion, low claims. The ones with a lot of promotion had higher. Kind of makes sense. What can I learn? What's wrong with that? But when you dig into it a little bit deeper and you look at the claims per HCP, I'm always curious. In any group, there's always a bunch of zeros, right? So why are they zero, particularly on the ones at the bottom that are getting promoted a lot? So you look at this and you say, okay, I'm not going to try to analyze all of these, but what fascinates me is these 200 on the far right that got no promotion but had a ton of claims, way above the norm. What's going on there? Can I apply Gawande variables to them and say, hey, who are these guys? How are they different? What can I learn from them? Because clearly, it's not a big number, but there's an opportunity there. The flip to that is the 6,000 down at the bottom, 20% of that ideal group that didn't have any claims. So presumably, they were selected for this investment based on some level of information. And yet, 20-ish% of them didn't do anything. How are they different than the 9,000 on the far right that had 41 plus claims? There's something different there. I want to understand it. So one of my favorite lines about data and analytics is you torture the data till it confesses. I think that's such a great line because it means you keep drilling into the data. You keep going deeper until you get the answer. And I think oftentimes we don't do that. So what does data-driven decision-making really mean? Well, it means a lot more if I understand the difference between the 6,000 and the 9,000. Because now I know, wait a minute, I think these guys are all the smaller accounts. They're not seeing the field as often. Maybe we need to do something there that's different. Or maybe they're on a contract with another company and we're never going to get them to buy from us. So therefore, let's take them out of the mix. Last thing about averages. If this woman came down from the US Open and walked into this room, our average net worth would go up pretty significantly. Okay, benchmarks, invite average. This is Charlie Munger, who was one of the great investors in the world with Warren Buffett, and he had this line, mimicking the herd invites regression to the mean. And I think what that means is, in our world, is when you try to go to what the herd wants, which is the average. That's regression to the mean. You're regressing to the average. So when you set benchmarks for a campaign, are you just setting average response rates that you're trying to get, average performance? That's the benchmark. So at the end, it says, following the crowd only guarantees average results. So I think it's interesting when you think about that. I've never been a big fan of benchmarks for that reason. It doesn't matter what the benchmark is. It matters what you need to be successful in your specific market with your brand at your investment level, and forget the benchmark. It's why the answer in a lot of business questions is it all depends. It all depends on a whole bunch of stuff. So if the benchmark is X, how are you going to get X? Well, it all depends on these 10 things. The one place that I did find, and I'm going to bring back Roger Martin in a sec, where benchmarks can make sense are this is a sell for Roger Martin because I love his stuff. He said the difference between operating imperatives and strategy choices is if the opposite of that is stupid or not, his words. So where you look at an important initiative for which the opposite is false, then that's an operating imperative. So example is, we want to be best-in-class customer experience. The opposite of that is worst-in-class customer experience. Doesn't make any sense. That's not a strategy. That's an operating imperative. I think a benchmark makes sense there. What defines customer experience, how quickly you respond to a customer complaint, things that are pretty straightforward and that you have to meet certain criteria. But a strategy is something where the opposite is not stupid on its own. It's a strategic choice, which are always very difficult to make. So for example, I work in vaccines. We have vaccines that are available to people over 50 and over. Our strategy might be women age 50 and over. The opposite of that is men 50 and over. That's a choice. It's not stupid on its own. You can say, well, we make a choice. I don't think benchmarks have any play there at all. You then have to say, how am I going to convert these customers, or these patients to get vaccinated? I'm going to focus on this one group. I don't care what the benchmarks are in behavior. I'm trying to market to them on their own because I made a choice that they're really important for what we're doing. So another question in the analytics space is, like, how precise does my measurement need to be? A lot of times we spend time trying to get very precise in what we're doing. Often that can make sense, but many times it doesn't. And do you really need that precision? Because one of the challenges is it's going to take a long time to get those precision measures. It might take longer than you think. And the longer it takes, the more likely other factors come into play. So there could be a national event, there could be a new jobs report that comes out. All of a sudden, if patients are thinking about getting your product or not, they might be worried about their job. That can affect it. All these kinds of things can come into play the longer the analysis is open. I'm going to talk later about how you can't go too short either. So you got to find that right window of time to make the analysis that alleviates the concern about all these variables going on out there. And that's more about a measurement plan being done up front. So the other part of that is, what decision am I making from this analysis? Do I need it to be so precise that, being off by 0.1% matters? I think it matters when you're paying salespeople a commission. That's probably it. But most of the time, your investment in marketing doesn't matter to be that precise. Your ROI is 4 to 1 or 3.8 to 1. Does it really matter? It's successful enough that you can invest more. So it got me thinking about a bunch of other stuff. And I always think about this one, like, why do we get limits on numbers of slides but not on font size? And so you look at these, and a lot of times they look like this or worse. I just went to bad slide, right? I didn't want to call anybody out. So, but why do we do that? So many of you probably have gotten a request like this. Hey, I need one slide on omnichannel for a leadership meeting, tomorrow. So what do? You put all this kind of crap in there, and it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. You got the font that's as 6 point, as low as you can go, and still have it be somewhat legible. Why do we do that? I don't understand. The font size that I've used with my team in the past, 30 point or bigger. Tell the story, keep it big. Don't put something so microscopic that you can't. If this was an actual part of the presentation, you have no idea what the message is there. There's no story there. Maybe there is, but who knows what it is? It's buried under all the slides. So it kind of got me thinking about, we've all heard of data scientists. I think there should be data artists. There should be people out there who understand data and who can compile the story in a way that communicates something that's really complex into something that makes sense for the average audience, or for the audience that you're talking to. Where you say, I don't have to have a PhD in statistics to understand all this stuff, but I need to know that the insight I got from this behavior after I've tortured the data is, it's the younger audience that just doesn't get what we're doing. Whatever. It makes sense for me to do that, to think about a data artist that is really, they're very skilled. You have a PhD in statistics. These people know the numbers very well. It's not always easy to communicate it to a non-PhD audience. Okay, second question. Are personalization and modular content worth the effort? And I'll start that with, I'm not against either one of these concepts as an idea. The question I'm raising is the worth the effort part. And that means, are you getting the response and the impact, the return on it for the effort that's required for both of these? We'll talk about each one of them individually, but just lumping them together for now. And you say, it's effort, not cost. I'm focusing on the time, because what we learn is, how long does it take a team to put a project together? It's not just you or your team, it's your agency, it's the MLR group, it's the analytics, it's all of these people getting involved. So how much time are they spending, and what are they not doing while they're doing this? What's that trade-off? I'm raising that as an issue that we should be thinking about, not just saying personalization doesn't work, don't do it. It's like you got to consider it in context of everything else that can be done. So my experience in personalization, which isn't terrific, we've not done a lot of it, certainly not done it maybe as well as we could, is I look at it like top, middle, and bottom of funnel. So top of funnel, people that are just starting to look for interest in your brand. I don't think you need a personalized message. You need a very standardized best message of the brand, best benefit message, because that best benefit is likely to appeal to everybody. I don't know you well enough to say, oh, for you, it's this best benefit plus this other stuff. I just want to get you out of the starting blocks to say, I want to know more about your brand. Oh, these best benefits make sense. The mid-tier, as you start going a little bit deeper into their search for literal search, but also their journey of becoming a potential customer, is more customized. So the example here is GSK, we have meningitis vaccines for adolescents. We have two constituencies on the HCP side. We have primary care doctors, and we have pediatricians. We could each market to them differently as a customized group, right? Pediatricians, very different in how they talk to patients, how they schedule follow-ups and so on. Primary care, very different. They're treating all kinds of stuff. So we can have a very customized message there. It doesn't have to be personalized. Then finally, bottom of the funnel, ready to buy, triggered messages to the field. That's the ultimate personalized message, right? The salesperson who knows this customer very well. Now, can we do personalized messaging in other ways and with other technologies and automation and stuff? Sure. But the question is, you got to make it relevant to the audience. Making it faster and making it cheaper doesn't do anything if it doesn't make it better. Modular content, in my mind, the cousin of personalization. Very similar in approach in a lot of things. What I've seen with modular content that we've done, we tend to do modular content initiatives for the least impactful brands. Those are, to me, email banners. I'd say least impactful in the sense that they're part of the overall omni-channel mix. They have a role, but carving through multiple hundreds of different options in how you put together content for an email that's not going to be seen by probably 90% of the people, is that the best use of time of the team? How do you know which are the right paragraphs or right modules of content to put together? AI can help. That's history, right? That's looking backwards. Can't always look forward. You have to apply that. You need human intervention. And it goes back to the same thing. All the teams that are involved in this, the review team, is the impact greater than the effort? It's always the question, because it's more effort than you think. If you work in pharma for any period of time, you know that. You think, oh, we can get this live in 6 weeks. It doesn't usually work that way. It takes longer. So you have to account for that. And by the way, we're going to do this modular content initiative. We're going to put this other initiative off to the side. That's great as long as that other one isn't as valuable as modular content or whatever. So the other part that I've seen that we've been not great at is significant changes in the content. Is the content truly different for each module? And the combinations are different enough that the message I get compared to you guys is very different because it feels right for me. Is it worth all that effort? So if the answer is yes, it is, then I'm all in. I think it's great. I'm just not always convinced that it is. So the message there is sort of go big, because you want to get the audience's attention, which is really difficult. Obviously, there's a quote, I was just reading it this morning, 89% of advertising is ignored. So just remember that. So when people talk about bombarding customers with messages and overwhelming them they don't even notice. 9 out of 10 times they don't even notice. So, it's I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about getting their attention. Okay, next sub-question in this group, the rights. We hear the rights often. The right customer, right message, right channel, right time. Does it actually work? Is there any evidence that this actually works? I mean, I haven't really seen it, so I'm just challenging it, raising the question. And I look at these, when I look at each one of these individually, I believe we probably know the right customer most of the time, at least on the HCP side. Got an extensive data set on HCPs. You know, it's like, okay, that's probably pretty good. The right message at the right time, how do we know? I mean, I know the right message about the brand, but do I know what the right time is for that message? I don't know. The right channel? So I'm not a channel preference person. I don't believe channel preference is real. I think we respond to whatever channel makes sense. That A plus B greater than 2A or 2B means if those were channels, you'd be better off with one frequency in A and B rather than two in either one. So you spread that message, more likely to hit somebody through these different, because I don't think about your own life. Do you really have a channel preference of I only respond in this channel? I don't think it's that's front of your mind. I think it's just something that happens, whatever triggers the right response, and you go, yeah, I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna go to the website and just order it, or I'm gonna go to their app or whatever. You don't follow that sort of blindly. And then the right time. I can't see most of you out there, so I don't know the answer. I don't know if you know this or not. Has anybody heard of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute? You can clap if you have. No. Okay. You should. You should pay attention to them. They're in Australia. They're a marketing strategy group. They do amazing work. And they did this study in B2B marketing of what they call the 95-5 rule, which is 95% of the time, the market you're going to is not in the frame of mind to buy. You know, obviously, pretty much all the time. So when you're going to them, we talk about like, I don't want to overwhelm them with messaging. It's like there's a very high likelihood they're not going to buy. The best analogy is car buying, right? Unless you're in the market today for a car, most of us aren't paying attention to car ads. But car ads run all the time. And the reason they do is what's called the long and short. Les Binet and Peter Fields are also people that you guys should pay attention to. They've done a lot of marketing effectiveness studies in the UK, but it's long and short. So the long is brand building, messaging. Roughly, the rules of thumb are always dangerous, but it's like a 60-40. 60% of budget for brand building, 40% for performance. But of course, it all depends on your circumstance. But what they're saying is you need to be out there constantly with your message. So if you think of car ads, think of Toyota RAV4, for example. They're always advertising benefit of the car. You probably don't even pay attention to it most of the time. They also put in the short performance messaging. It's Toyotathon over Labor Day or whatever, and they have deals. You don't notice that either until you're in the market. And then it's like, how do they know I'm looking at a RAV4? Because they're always there. Without that, you're going to miss it. If you're in the market for an SUV and whatever other criteria you have that RAV4 would meet, you miss that if they're not there all the time, even though you don't cognitively remember it. It's in your mind. That's what you're trying to get. And there's I forget the exact line from one of these guys at Ehrenberg Bass, but it was like, you're not going for clicks, you're going for memories. You're trying to get in the memory of the customer because you don't know when they're going to need your information. If you knew that, oh, they're going to buy a car, or they're going to buy my product in December, it's easy. But you don't know that. Most of the time you don't. Flu vaccine for us is the one we kind of do, but that's it. Everything else, you don't know. Okay, so this other observational thing that I just wonder about is people that drive with their visor down and the sun's behind them, I think are always bad drivers. I'm curious if other people know that or see that, but it's like 100% to me. So if you see somebody driving with their visor down, they can't see. Why are they doing that? Anyway, okay. Thank you for that. So last question. Why is efficiency prioritized? And you may think, well, I don't know that it's prioritized. I'm not sure about that. If you pay attention in meetings, notice how often efficiency is talked about. Not effectiveness, but efficiency. And it sort of got me, thinking about it. If effectiveness is so important, and we see there are marketing effectiveness awards, there's advertising effectiveness, all kinds of effectiveness journals or articles in journals about effectiveness, that's really a key topic, which makes sense. You want to be effective. Why do we talk so much more about efficiency? And one of my other favorite business guys of all time is a guy named Peter Drucker, who said something way back that said, nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. I think that's true in your business life. It's also true in your marketing, spend and marketing campaigns. So think about where you spend your time. Getting more efficient at something that doesn't really matter doesn't help you. Becoming efficient at an ad campaign when you're not driving more effectiveness doesn't matter. So I did clean this up for this presentation, but basically crap that arrives at the speed of light is still crap. So it's about effectiveness. You start with effectiveness because you can't go back. You can't make something really efficient and then try to make it effective. I just don't think it works that way. When we talk about developing new ideas or new things with a team, we start with effect. How can I make this the most effective? I don't care about cost. It doesn't matter. Because if I can make this really effective, okay, the return might not be as high as I'd like it to be, but now I can start to dabble with, can I take some costs out? Can I do some things to make it more efficient? But I think if you start there, I don't think you go to effective after that. I think that's really difficult and almost impossible. So when you kind of summarize those things and you look at it and say, the scale is way off. If you think about a 10% gain in effectiveness, in most pharma brands, you're probably talking about millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, if you can be more effective. If you're more efficient and you save 10%, you're talking about maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe low single-digit millions, maybe. Depends on the budget. But the scale's way different. Put the effort, and you talk about where you put your time, put it into being more effective, not being more efficient. The gains are so much bigger. Now, the problem is, of course, the finance guys and like the efficiency you can show. Hey, we spent $100, now we're spending $80. We saved $20. It seems pretty true. It's like, who can challenge that? Except when you say, but we're going to be more effective. I'm going to go from 500 to 550. I've just gained a lot more revenue than in whatever cost savings there might be. So I just think it's worth spending the time thinking about it from that perspective and not go right to efficiency. And I would just suggest, think about meetings over the next couple of weeks that you're in when you're talking about spends or campaigns or whatever, that kind of stuff. Just pay attention to see how often efficiency is coming up. Not overtly as a word, but it's there. Well, if we just wait a little bit longer, we won't, it's often with websites, so it's not a cost thing. We want to add this to the website now, but we've got another update coming in 2 months, so why just do it twice? Except the website in 2 months is not going to happen in 2 months. It's going to be like 3 or 4 months, right? So, and who cares? If what I'm adding to the website is going to be valuable now, let's do it. I want to try to drive performance and drive connection with the audience. Effectiveness is a long-term thing. You're talking about changing behaviors of customers. You're influencing behavior so they keep buying. You can always do efficiency later. You can always try to make something more efficient after you make it effective. Okay, another one of these that makes me nuts. Why do people hop or jump to another call instead of just leaving for another call? I don't get it. The corollary to that is, why does the person who hasn't said anything in the whole meeting then have to put in the chat, sorry, need to jump, but you didn't even know you were there? So, okay. So you've seen this. Okay, last question. Is failing fast a good idea? We hear a lot about failing. Oh, you got to fail fast, keep moving, move speed of sound, it's all good. I'm not sure it is a good idea. Mainly because there's a couple of things about failing fast and making a decision too quickly. Because buying behavior depends on what you're doing, but it depends. That's the answer to everything. But if what you're trying to do is influence behavior change, you have to understand how long it's going to take for that behavior to change. So if you make a judgment too quickly, you can make the wrong decision. We've done that. We've done that not in investing more, but actually reducing an investment for a high-value customer group, reduce the investment, don't see any effect, go, this is great. We can reinvest somewhere else until month 4, and all of a sudden their buying behavior goes down. Because there's this latent effect of advertising and marketing and messaging. It takes time. So there's this is kind of just a study looking at okay, what you spend in this quarter today is likely to influence behavior in the next quarter. The risky part, the danger zone coming up is Q4, where we're going to cut budget in Q4 to make the number, and then Q1 response comes off a little soft. Nobody remembers what happened in Q4, but that's when it's going to show up. It doesn't show up immediately. So on the flip side, when you're doing something to drive behavior and drive effectiveness, it takes time. So you say, okay, I need to give it time. But to what I said earlier, not so much time that you get all these other factors. So that's the thing you think through in the beginning. So you know, hey, our window of analysis is going to be April. That's when we're going to figure out if this works or not. Okay, so to kind of wrap it all up, these are the three main questions. How can data from the past be used for decisions about the future? Are personalization modular content worth it? And why is efficiency prioritized? So to let that elephant go and fly like Dumbo, data from the past, decisions are about the future. If you apply variables that show the difference, you too can be a data-driven decision maker. Personalization and modular content to me are rarely worth the effort. Be open to it. I think it makes sense to consider it, but I think as if you are the decision maker now, you have to hold it really tight and say, is this going to be big enough to matter? Because it's going to be a lot of effort. Automation or not, it's going to be a lot of effort. Then effectiveness first, and then efficiency. And finally, why does the waiter always interrupt at the best part of your story? Thank you.